Okay, we're going to be talking about banishing once again, and particularly candles and oils for banishing and reversals and removals. So, banishing is a pretty general term and has the benefits and disadvantages of being very general in its effects. Banishing doesn't really care per se if what it's getting rid of is good for you or bad for you. It just kind of gets rid of shit. So yeah, that may or may not be a good thing. Obviously, having statements of intent or doing other rituals in tandem with banishing tends to work better if what you're looking for is a specific result. Now, in regards to beginning magic, a lot of beginners' rituals and beginners' practices involve banishing. In fact, I believe Frederick Xavier has, I believe in his either first or second video, I think it's his second one, if I'm not mistaken. I've watched it quite a few times, but I don't remember exactly which one it was. So Frederick Xavier has a video where he talks about just simply accepting and banishing certain thoughts. So I think he says something about along the lines of if it's a good thought or a thought that you like, then you say in your head or under your breath or even out loud that you accept the thought, and if not, then you just say you banish the thought or get rid of the thought, whatever. So, I'm a little out of breath. It's so fucking hot still. But I'll digress. I shouldn't be talking about the heat. I should be focusing on the topic at hand. So, more about banishing. Now, we will get on to cleansing, reversals, and uncrossing. So, there is the official uncrossing ritual, although there are many ways to do uncrossings. You can do uncrossings with soap. I've seen it with soap. And then I've also seen uncrossing oils. Those are pretty common. Probably more common than should be out there because, quite frankly, a lot of magical oils aren't really crafted properly. They may have the proper herbs and correspondences and whatnot, but they can be made on the wrong day, not consecrated, pretty much anything and everything. So, yeah, there's that. And on top of that, I guess we should just kind of segue whether into protection or reversals. I'm kind of making this up on the fly, so this sounds impromptu. It's because it really fucking is. I literally thought of this last minute, like, I'm just like, hey, I gotta make another video. So, might as well. Let's talk about reversals. So, yeah, reversals, pretty straightforward. It just reverses whatever is coming to you back to the sender. This may or may not work. It could end up reversing to them, and then they pick up that you're reversing to them, and then it just kind of becomes this magical back and forth battle. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of people would say, I'll just curse and do baneful magic, beat them the fuck up and just knock them out. Shoot them down. Beat them so fucking bad that they can't get back up. No, don't do that. Especially if you are in a system that involves angels or spirits that are known for kicking ass, because angels have a way of kind of teaching you lessons in very profound ways. And so, yeah, you probably shouldn't do that. And, well, I guess we'll talk about protection now. So, usually, what you should do is sort of banish and then do protection. Although you can do them in tandem, but typically you wouldn't protect before you banish. So if you're going to do, say, a deflection, or better yet, just a banishing, if you're going to banish something really negative, like if you're extremely crossed up, then yeah, it's probably better just to do a banishing spell or an uncrossing spell. You could do, the LBRH, the Lesser Banishing Ritual, the Hexagram. That would be if you're under some really harsh astrological transits, although some of them you just can't really, you know, get rid of. Particularly really rough Saturn transits, mainly Saturn return. Although Saturn opposition can be pretty tough too. That one can come down pretty harsh. And there's not much you can do about it except just kind of wait it out or deal with the karma that you've been given. So I think we'll go on to protection now. Have we talked about protection yet? Yeah, protection's pretty straightforward. You just protect yourself and then protect whatever you have. Best ways to do protection magic are with talismans, sigils, and then if you're in a Abrahamic system or a pseudo-Abrahamic system, then you could just invoke god names, particularly ones that have to do with protection. In fact, that's kind of one of the main benefits of theurgy, is that if you do theurgy, it's going to have a lot of thaumaturgical effects. It will tend to make things better, but mostly the main real-world benefit of theurgy is protection. Yeah, that's like the biggest benefit of theurgy is just protecting yourself and protecting whatever you have around you. So yeah, there's that. But theurgy can be a little tricky because if you're doing theurgy with the wrong intent, it can kind of backfire and kick your ass. So yeah, just be careful of that. I hope I didn't sound too offshoot today, but whatever. I mean, I'll just kind of, yeah, leave it at that. All right. We'll see you next time, and thanks for watching. So, let's talk a bit about the sign of silence, which I've already gone over in at least 2 videos, probably more than 4 of them, but it would be worth going over again as we're going to be talking about keeping your practices secret, or better yet, hidden in plain sight. So the most obvious things you can do are just not tell anyone, although that's easier said than done, especially if you're already practicing. One thing you can do is simply finding substitutes for your tools. So instead of getting a ritual dagger or a fame or a proper Golden Dawn air dagger, you could simply get a butter knife, consecrate it, and there you go. You have a ritual dagger, or at least something you can use as a ritual dagger. As far as sigils go, you can just draw some basic shapes, do some artwork. That always works. And as far as just keeping silent about things, well, you can always do your rituals under your breath, particularly if you're doing the Golden Dawn rituals, such as the rituals of the pentagram, hexagram, metal pillar. Sorry, my dogs were barking a bit and had to pause recording, but now I am back. Kind of forgot what I was talking about, but yeah, funny how I was talking about silence and then my dogs start barking. The irony, that's one of the constants of the universe, as Uncle Birch put it. It was actually from a pretty old video of his. And what else can we talk about in terms of keeping your magic or your practices secret? Well, don't call it magic. And if you happen to be in an extreme case where people do find out about it and they insist on just prying into your life, this can be the case for parents, relatives, family members, or people that just insist on getting into your business. They just won't stop asking, may even become aggressive with it. Now, as an occultist, as a practitioner, it's better not to lie, but just kind of tell them a half truth. But of course, you shouldn't let it get to that point in the first place. You can simply just disguise your practices. So if you're drawing sigils, like I said, don't, use any weird alphabets, or don't make it look too stereotypically magical, is the best way to put it. And I've already talked about your tools and doing your rituals under your breath. Then there's, of course, astral projection, meditation, and, of course, just keeping your space clean. As far as cleaning your tools or implements, consecration goes, you can use simple things like salt water to at least clear the energies out. You don't have to use black salt, you can just use regular sea salt, which would be the best option. And I think that'll be about it for this one. So take care, and we'll see each other next time. All right, let's talk a little bit about fate and free will. Something we all like to talk and hear about. But I guess I'll just give you my own taking on it. It's not fact, it's not opinion, it's just my personal experience. So, when I was younger, I used to believe that there is free will. I did believe in free will, and that free will does exist, but I was under the impression that your outcomes in life were ultimately based on the circumstances that you were in. And that free will was simply taking the best course of action based on the knowledge that you had of your circumstances. Something along those lines. But as I got older, I learned about astrology. And that kind of changed things up a little, but not quite yet, because I wasn't too familiar with astrology. I just knew a little bit about it. And it was also around that time that I had learned that the successes and failures in my life were 80% the result of my own doing. Now, is that to say that it was ultimately my free will, or it was subconscious programming, that it was something else, it was genetics, so on and so forth? Yes, well, something we can't really say. Does free will even exist? It's a good question. Good question for all of you. Now, when I saw that most of my successes and failures were ultimately pinned on me and my actions, well, that definitely changed things up for me. It definitely felt empowering, that I had a sense of responsibility, but at the same time, it left a lot of unanswered questions, particularly as I became more and more involved with astrology. As I learned more about astrology, and as I learned about my natal placements, I began to learn that my natal placements and all the transits seemed to line up with my life, my outcomes in life. That even when I made my own decisions, even the events in my life that were seemingly my fault, and mind you, they still are, that doesn't change the fact that what you do is kind of your fault. Well, not really. It's more of your programming. that programming is next to impossible to change, completely at least. Sure, there are things you can do to modify it and improve upon it, if you want to use that word. But to completely wipe it clean and to change it altogether, well, you pretty much have to die and come back as a new person. And even then, there's going to be debate as to whether at least some parts of your consciousness carry through to the next life, so on and so forth. If for those of you that believe in reincarnation, and I'm not going to get too off the mark. Maybe we can talk about reincarnation further on in this video, or maybe even a little more in another video. But back to what I was saying about free will. It wasn't so much that it's your fault, but that it is absolutely your responsibility. Your life and everything that happens in your life is ultimately your responsibility. It truly is, even if it's not your fault. Because fault and responsibility are not one and the same. But as I got more and more involved in astrology, I became really convinced that what happens in your life is kind of already set in stone. It's kind of predetermined. There are many possibilities, and there are many ways that a certain placement or aspect can play out, and many different ways that one's natal chart can play out, and how you may interact, how your natal chart and your soul, spirit, whatever you want to call it, interacts with other souls and spirits. That sort of synastry, for those of you that are interested in synastry. And that's kind of a good way to put it. But then when I learned about subconscious programming, and I learned about the fact that you can change your subconscious programming at least a little bit, at least enough to make a significant difference, it kind of became hard for me to pin everything all on astrology, all on fate. Now, do I still believe fate is a part of everyone's lives? Yes, absolutely. Now, I don't believe that fate always turns out in your best interests, at least not in this lifetime. I mean, there are plenty of people out there that have very, very difficult lives and will have very difficult lives up until the day they die. Some people are just going to have to drown in this life. That's the unfortunate fact of it. Now, there are certainly things we can do to save ourselves, to fight, but you don't want to look at it in terms of fighting. You want to look at it in terms of changing things, even creating circumstances that are more favorable to you. Magic was a very interesting topic for me because it showed how you can really reprogram the reality around you. But as I also looked at astrology, I realized that life was a little more complex than that. I had to clear my throat there, and I'm not going to edit that out. So, as I learned that everything that ultimately happened in my life was all reflective right there in the natal chart. It was all right there. It's all written in the stars, per se. No matter how much magic I did, no matter how much reprogramming I did, it all seemed to just play out. In fact, like I said before, much of my programming, still to this day, is a result of things that happened years ago and things that continued to happen years and years ago up until today, this moment, up until the present. So it didn't seem to really change much, per se. I mean, sure, it may have given me the possibilities that were more favorable to me, because if, say, a planet in a specific sun house gives you so many possible outcomes, and the entire chart will kind of narrow it down to maybe 100, 200, maybe even less than that of possible outcomes. And if you take synastry into account, other people's natal placements and how they interact with you, even someone on the complete opposite side of the world that's 20 years older than you is interacting with you, because we're all interconnected. And so it just left a lot of unanswered questions for me. A lot of these unanswered questions of how to how can you change your fate? Can you rewrite your destiny? Or is it already there? Was I already predetermined to get into the occult, to find ways to change my subconscious, to change my programming, to interact with the different mechanisms of the universe to create the life that I ultimately wanted? Now, mind you, even the most profound and effective magic, which, mind you, is usually some of the simplest magic, some of the simplest methods of reprogramming your mind, are not really going to change your ultimate natal placement, your ultimate destiny. It can give you more favorable outcomes. It can change things here and there. It can change how the story plays out. But eventually, you kind of meet the same fate. You run into the people that you were always meant to run into, do the things that you were always meant to do, and live the life that you were always meant to live. Because, mind you, in my natal chart, I have plenty of placements that show my interest in the occult, in spirituality, and in gaining control of the mechanisms of the universe that govern every one of our lives. It's really fascinating. And I'm feeling a bit rambly today, so I think I'll just keep at it for maybe another minute. Because what it really comes down to is, I guess, it's just unanswered questions. Questions that will never truly be answered. Is life truly what you make of it? Or is it all just written in fate? And mind you, it was very much an illusion for me, because when I had gone solely in the camp of predeterminism, everything was genetically predetermined. Even your actions were predetermined, and the circumstances you were born into were predetermined. Well, you have free will, but it's not really going to make a difference. Free will is simply you taking the best course of action based on the circumstances that you have, but ultimately those circumstances are going to limit you and dictate the life that you ultimately have. And your success and failures, I'd gone all the way from that to no, you can't reprogram the fabric of your reality. You can change it. You can play around with it. You can exert your will onto what we call the universe, the divine, the collective consciousness, all the way back to, well, it was kind of written in the stars all along. And it's quite an interesting take. I think this is by far the most interesting video that I've made. And I hope you all enjoy it. Take care. And I'm signing off.